that Moses.
Today in the Old Scholars, Hutchins, who represent the Anglican establishment of Hobart, are taking on St Virgils, who represent the Catholics. So although it's usually a very friendly league, today could erupt like the streets of Belfast. Earlier this morning we caught up with St Virgils player and legend of the package to ask him how he prepares for such a conflict.
Package?
G'day Dave, how you going, mate?
Good.
I've loved wrestling since I was 13 years of age, and like in the early 90s I was a big WWF fan. I still am now. There's a wrestler running around called Lex the Total Package Luger, and I actually started calling myself Lex at the footy club a few years ago, and it stemmed from that.
So they paraphrased your nickname.
That's
from
right,
Lex
yeah.
to Package.
Yeah, everyone thinks I made up my own nickname, but I didn't. It's just been paraphrased.
What's the difference between a Hutchins player and a St Virgils player?
Well, just one thing. I think we like beer more.
Mm-hmm. They more go the Chardonnay, do they?
Yeah, I think so. We only have to go look at their, their players, their past players' dues and all that. Our supporters are drinking beer. Their supporters are drinking Chardonnay. So
the game itself, your game day routine. Take us through some of the stuff you've got here. You've got your own special speedos, I believe.
Yeah, these were my favourites. We won the grand final in 1998.
Mm-hmm.
And I happen to be wearing these, so these are part of my game day routine now. I sort of don't ever try and not wear them anyway. If I can't find them, I usually don't feel very confident going into the game.
You just wash them at the end of the season?
Oh, I do wash them work well, put it that way, Dave.
But you wouldn't have a game without those, yeah?
Well, I wouldn't have a good game, put it that way.
Helps with the whole package, I guess.
Yeah, that's right. The undies, the speedos, the bronze dozzy.
That's great.
Everything.
Now, playing Hutchins today,
Mm-hmm.
what sort of game are you expecting?
Pretty tough game. They're undefeated. They're a good team, but I think we might have the the side to beat them today. Hopefully, at the end of the year, in the long run, hopefully we can make the grand final. And I assume that we'd probably be playing them if we did make the grand final and knock them off because we own one for last year.
See you at the footy package.
No worries, mate. See ya.
See ya. Go get them, package.
After a brotherly farewell, we followed Package down to Newtown Bike Track Oval, the home of St Virgils. As usual, we were greeted at the gate and invited in. Under the foothills of Mount Wellington, a distinguished crowd was already gathering itself and eagerly anticipating today's big clash. Hutchins and the Old Scholars are known as the Beans, and like Carlton in the AFL, they're the team that everyone loves to beat. Legend has it the name Beans comes from an incident many years ago when an opposition coach, just before playing Hutchins, held out a handful of jelly beans to the boys, threw them on the ground and said, "That is Hutchins." Let's find out why. Excuse me, why are Hutchins called the Beans?
They're jelly beans. Jelly beans.
Where does it come from?
From us.
Why jelly beans?
Just a great rivalry. Just a name that we made up through the rivalry, and it's sort of stuck with us.
Like jelly beans are sticky?
Jelly beans stick, exactly right. Exactly right.
Well, Dave, I've heard on very good authority that it's because they're a little bit soft in the middle.
Bosie, why are Hutchins called the Beans?
Well, I'm not so sure, Dave. Maybe it's the colour scheme, the jelly beans, I think it probably originates from, but us old St Virgils boys reckon it's because they're nice and soft in the centre, and we can sort of smooth them out a bit at times.
Goes back to years ago when I used to play football with Claremont, and they were always known as the jelly beans. They were all hard on the outside and soft in the middle, but for some reason it's always stuck with them.
Thanks
usually do.
Thanks very much.
Not a problem.
It was enough talk of beans and time for the big game itself, and boy was Package pumped. Out on the ground, the Hutchins boys were gathering themselves ready for the big contest, and Package took it upon himself to fire his boys up before taking his place on the bench. Out on the ground, the players showed they had plenty of skill, and in a very high-scoring first quarter, which was pretty much goal for goal, both Hutchins and St Virgils showed they could match it with pretty much any SFL side, as exemplified by these two freakish goals by St Virgils' Shane Donoghue. O'Reilly and Dygan were also very good for St Virgils, while Bailey was getting heaps of the ball for Hutchins and very strong in the forward line. At quarter time, Cameron Brown told his boys they were involved in a fantastic game of footy. While the package was listening on, he seemed somehow lost in his own world, wondering whether he was going to get on the ground, whether he was going to stay on the bench all day. Was he going to get a kick? Was he going to be involved? Everyone round the ground was surprised to see St Virgils' key defensive weapon, the package, still on the bench through the second quarter, while Hutchins piled on the goals to go to half-time 23 points up. Meanwhile, I decided to get the inside story on Hutchins from former President Ian Pook. Ian, tell us how Hutchins started as a club.
From my understanding, the club played in a public school old boys association back in the 30s, and then when the amateurs were formed in 1948, they became part of that association. And in 1981, when the amateurs and the old scholars went their separate ways, they were successful with the first flag in 1981.
Has St Virgils always been the arch enemy?
They have. I think this goes back to the school days when Hutchins and Virgils had great rivalry. I think they've carried it over into the old scholars, because most of them are former opponents during school days. So yes, it makes good for competition.
The old school tie is still part of it?
That's an interesting point. I think probably from an outsider, people would say that still exists. Maybe some truth in that comment, but I don't think it's as great as what people think it is.
Do you still call them the mix?
Well, some do. Not me personally, but yeah, I think that name seems to fit pretty well.
Talking to Ian made me pretty hungry. I noticed a few salves were going down around the ground, but they seemed a little bit chewy for my taste. On further inspection, I discovered Wayne and Shirley's portable canteen, where they have a sandwich-making factory that provides rolls and healthy sandwiches to those who really need them. Shirley, what's the absolute specialty amongst your sandwiches here?
The curried egg sandwiches. They are a real treat. You must try them. It's a special recipe.
Yeah.
No one else has our recipe.
Oh, really? So what's in it?
I'm not going to tell you.
What about for 50 cents?
No,
No?
sorry.
Oh.
No, sorry. Would you
Okay.
like to try
I'll
one?
try one then, all right.
We have got one opened here for you.
Pre-opened, excellent. Here we go.
Silk.
Curried egg sandwich from Wayne and Shirley's Sandwich Factory. That's great. Look at that. After finishing my snack, I headed up to the St Virgils club rooms, which must be one of the best footy viewing arenas in all of Tassie, to find out more about the culture of Old Scholars.
Yeah, Old Scholars is it's a really good competition. It's clean. You don't get the biffs behind play and stuff like that. We play pretty good standard of football, so yeah, it's all pretty much central base. This year we let Richmond come into the competition, and that was probably the furthest you have to travel. And apart from that, it's pretty much all in town and little travel, and yeah, good enjoyable footy.
What's the difference between the Hutchins mentality and the St Virgils mentality?
Mentality? Oh, thanks for that. You didn't tell me you were going to ask that. I don't know if there's much of a mentality.
What's the difference between a Hutchins person and a St Virgils person?
Yeah, when you asked me that, originally I thought, geez, I'm not real sure, but I looked out in the ground and we've got a couple of bigger boys, so I reckon maybe we enjoy our beers a bit more. I think,
whereas they go for a Chardonnay?
Yeah, I think they might go for a Chardonnay or the red wines or something like that, yeah.
Do you drive different cars to them?
Oh, no doubt about that. You don't see too many beat-up old newts at their games, but yeah, it's a few differences in that regard, yeah.
The package is still on the bench. Do you think he'll get a run?
The total package, or as he calls himself these days, the genetic freak. Yeah, look, I reckon he'll get on. You know, he's a bit of a legend around the club, and he pumps his own tyres up a bit too. So, as I'm sure you saw this morning when you were speaking to him, he does. There's a bit of self-publicity never goes astray, but the package will get on. He'll be all right too.
Finally, the package was spotted on the ground. In the final quarter, he got his chance. With St Virgils only a goal behind Hutchins, he began exerting his influence straight away. With strong, clever defensive work, repelling attack after attack, he made us all wonder why he hadn't been out there all day. Then, in the dying moments of the game, Cameron Brown took a mark. After missing 2 easy goals early in the quarter, he put it straight through the middle to put the Saints back in front. And then, in the dying moments of the game, fittingly, Package had the last say of all.
St Virgils are winners.
Package,
you were sitting on the bench until the final quarter. Was it frustrating to be watching the game?
Yeah, it's always frustrating when you're watching the game, and you think you can make a difference, especially the side was behind at 3/4 time. It's you always think, maybe if I was out there things would be different, we'd be in front. But it was good to get on in the last quarter, and things seemed to turn around as well.
At 3/4 time, Cameron Brown said it's all one thing to talk up hating these guys, but you got to show it on the field by getting in front and winning the ball. The boys did that in the last quarter.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we put a lot more pressure on them, and they forced them into errors and they turned the ball over. That was the difference. We sort of applied ourselves a lot better at the footy. That was the difference.
How were your stats?
I think I had 5 kicks, 1 tackle, 1 shepherd. So not too bad for a quarter. If I played 4 quarters, that's 20 kicks, 4 tackles, 4 shepherds, and I had 2 opponents. So I would have had 8 different opponents. What do you think about that, Dave?
You're a legend.